The sound of Mason's boots pounding down our wooden stairs made my heart skip. Not the usual lazy weekend shuffle, but urgent, almost frantic. I'd just finished my last client consultation of the day, and something in those footsteps told me our Friday night plans were about to change. "Riley, we need to pack, now." Mason burst into our home office, his face flushed. He was already wearing his coat, car keys dangling from his fingers. "Pack? What's wrong?" I closed my laptop, watching him pace. The afternoon sun caught his wedding ring as he ran his fingers through his hair, a nervous habit I'd noticed more frequently lately. "Mother called. There's been a pipe burst at the main house. The whole east wing is flooding." He started pulling out drawers, grabbing random items. "She needs us to move in temporarily while they repair the damage. It'll be easier to help manage things from there." I stood up slowly, processing his words. Clara's mansion had always been more fortress than home, and now he wanted us to live there? "How long is temporarily?" "A few weeks, maybe a month." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Come on, we need to hurry. Logan's already there helping her salvage what she can." Of course Logan was there. Perfect, dependable Logan, who never missed an opportunity to play the dutiful son. I watched Mason stuffing clothes into a duffel bag, his movements jerky and uncertain. "Your mother has plenty of room in the West Wing," I said carefully. "Why doesn't she just move there while the repairs are done?" "Because she needs help, Riley." His voice carried an edge I rarely heard. "This isn't up for debate. We're going." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest whenever Clara was involved. "What about my clients? I have sessions scheduled here all next week." "Reschedule them. Work from Mother's home office. She's already said you're welcome to use it." He zipped up the bag with unnecessary force. "Please, just help me pack." I moved mechanically, gathering essentials while my mind raced. Something felt off. Mason's brewery was entering its busiest season. He'd been planning production schedules for weeks. Now suddenly he could drop everything to play handyman at his mother's house? My phone buzzed. A text from Diana. "Coffee tomorrow? Need to talk." I typed back quickly. "Rain check. Emergency move to Clara's. Call you later." Diana's response was immediate. "Clara's? What happened?" What happened indeed? I looked at Mason, now pulling suitcases from our closet. His shoulders were tight, his movements almost robotic. This wasn't just about a burst pipe. "Mason," I said softly, "what's really going on?" He froze for a moment, then continued pulling clothes from hangers. "Nothing's going on. Mother needs us, that's all." "Since when does Clara admit to needing anyone?" The words came out sharper than intended. "Especially me?" "Don't start." He turned, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes. Fear? Guilt? "Just, please, pack what you need for a month. We'll figure everything else out later." I nodded slowly, but my instincts were screaming. In the 3 years I'd known Clara, she'd never asked for help, never admitted weakness. Now, suddenly, she wanted us living under her roof? As I mechanically folded clothes into my suitcase, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror. The woman staring back looked composed, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. Something was shifting, something fundamental, and I had a feeling our temporary move to Clara's mansion would be anything but simple. Mason's phone buzzed. He checked it, his face tightening. "Mother's waiting. Are you ready?" I zipped my suitcase closed, the sound unnaturally final in our quiet bedroom. As ready as I'll ever be. What I didn't say was that I was ready for whatever game Clara was playing, because this wasn't about a burst pipe. This was about something else entirely, and I had a feeling I was about to find out exactly what that something was. Clara's mansion seemed to breathe disapproval with every creaking floorboard. I set up my laptop in her pristine home office, surrounded by awards and family photos where I didn't exist. 3 days in, and already the walls felt like they were closing in. "I trust you'll keep things orderly in here." Clara lingered in the doorway, her pearl necklace catching the morning light. "Some of these documents are quite valuable to the family history." "Of course," I said, arranging my client files. "I appreciate you letting me use the space." She glided closer, running a manicured finger across the mahogany desk. Mason mentioned you're some sort of fitness instructor? Personal trainer and nutrition coach, I corrected, keeping my voice level. I have my master's in sports science. How modern. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Though I always believed true ladies shouldn't pursue such physical occupations. Before I could respond, Logan appeared in the doorway, his architect's portfolio tucked under one arm. Mother, the contractors need your input on the East Wing repairs. Of course, darling. She touched his arm as she passed. Oh, and Riley? We dress for dinner here. Something appropriate, I trust. I waited until her footsteps faded before exhaling. My phone buzzed. A text from Diana. Surviving the dragon's lair? Barely, I typed back. Pretty sure she thinks I'm going to corrupt her precious family name with my physical occupation. Want to grab coffee? I can be there in 20 scene. I glanced at my schedule. Can't. 3 client calls this morning. Rain check? You can't hide in that office forever, came her reply. But I could try. I had just opened my first client's file when Logan reappeared, leaning against the doorframe with casual arrogance. Quite the setup you've got here, he said, eyeing my equipment. Though I'm surprised Mother allowed you to turn her office into a gym consultation room. It's temporary. I pulled up my client's progress charts. Just like the pipe repairs, right? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Must run in the family. About that, the contractors found some structural issues. Could take longer than expected. My stomach tightened. How much longer? Hard to say. These old houses, you know? He straightened his designer tie. But don't worry, Mother loves having family close. Well, most family. The implied exclusion hung in the air like poison. I turned back to my laptop, refusing to take the bait. I should prepare for my call. Of course. He lingered a moment longer. Oh, and Riley? I noticed you've been using the garden path for your morning runs. Mother's quite protective of her roses. Might want to find another route. After he left, I sat perfectly still, listening to the house's hollow silence. My phone buzzed again. Mason. Stuck at brewery. Don't wait up for dinner. Perfect. Another evening of Clara's subtle jabs across her formal dining table, with Logan smirking behind his wineglass. I opened my calendar, counting the days we'd been here. Only 3. It felt like 3 years. A notification popped up. My first client waiting for their video call. I put on my professional smile, determined not to let this place affect my work. But as I began the consultation, I noticed my video was slightly blurry, the internet connection unstable. Sorry, I told my client. Let me check the connection. I pulled up the Wi-Fi settings. The signal was fine yesterday, but now it barely registered. I switched to my phone's hotspot, making a mental note to ask Mason about the internet later. Though something told me the weak signal in this particular room wasn't accidental. By evening, my suspicions were confirmed. 3 canceled client calls due to technical issues, a missing charging cable, and somehow my detailed client files had been accidentally moved to a different folder while I was at lunch. I stood at the window, watching the sun set over Clara's precious rose garden. In the reflection, I caught a glimpse of Logan passing by the office door, speaking quietly into his phone. He glanced my way, that same smug smile playing on his lips. Fine. If they wanted to play games, I could play too. But they'd soon learn I wasn't just Mason's wife, the fitness instructor they could push around. I was something far more dangerous. I was someone with nothing left to lose. My phone lit up with another text from Diana. Sure you don't need backup? I smiled, finally typing back. Actually, I think I do. Coffee tomorrow. We need to talk. The first sign something was wrong came when my client screamed through the video call. Oh my God, Riley, are you okay? I glanced at my image on screen and froze. Someone had edited my professional profile photo, subtly warping my features to make me look gaunt and sickly. The kind of manipulation that whispered eating disorder without saying a word. Technical glitch, I lied, quickly ending the call. But my hands shook as I checked my other social media accounts. Each profile photo showed the same subtle alterations. The timestamp showed the changes were made last night, while I was having another silent dinner with Clara. Diana's coffee shop was mercifully empty when I arrived. She took one look at my face and ordered us both double shots. "Look at this!" I showed her my phone. 3 clients canceled this morning. Said they're concerned about my approach to health and wellness. "Logan," Diana said immediately. "Has to be. He's the only one with the design skills to pull this off." "But why?" I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "What does he get out of destroying my business?" "Control." Diana's photographer's eye studied my altered photos. "Clara's perfect son, watching his brother's common wife succeed, must be killing him." My phone buzzed. Mason again. "Late meeting, don't wait up." "When was the last time you two actually talked?" Diana asked softly. "Really talked?" "I don't know." I stared into my coffee. He's always at the brewery now, and when he is home, Clara needs him for something, or Logan has some crisis. "Speaking of Logan," Diana nodded toward the window. Outside, Logan was helping his partner Ethan into a car, their body language tense. Ethan pulled away from Logan's touch, his face tight with anger. "Trouble in paradise?" I murmured. "Ethan came to my studio yesterday for headshots," Diana said. "Let slip that Logan's been working late, taking mysterious calls. He thinks Logan's cheating." I watched Logan stand alone on the sidewalk, his perfect facade cracking just slightly. For a moment, he looked lost. Then he saw me through the window. His expression hardened instantly. Back at Clara's mansion, I found my office door locked. "For cleaning," the housekeeper said apologetically. My equipment and files were inside. I found Clara in her sitting room, arranging flowers. "Oh dear, was that today? I'm sure Logan has a spare key in his study. He'll be back this evening." "I have clients waiting," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I can't just—" "Family comes first, Riley." She snipped a rose stem with surgical precision. "Though I suppose that's a difficult concept for someone of your background to grasp." I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. "Oh, and I noticed you've been losing weight lately. Do try to take better care of yourself. We wouldn't want clients questioning your expertise." The pieces clicked together. The altered photos, the locked office, the whispered rumors. They weren't just trying to inconvenience me. They were systematically dismantling everything I'd built. In my bedroom, I pulled up my client list with trembling fingers. 3 more cancellations, 2 on hold to reassess their goals. My carefully built business was crumbling, and Mason was too busy with his precious brewery to notice. A notification popped up. Someone had tagged me in a post. A local fitness group where I often gave advice. The post was a concerned message about trainers promoting unhealthy behaviors, with my altered photos attached. Logan had liked it already. I closed my laptop and caught my reflection in the mirror. For a moment, I saw myself through their eyes. The outsider, the threat. The one who didn't belong in their perfect family portrait. Then I saw something else. The steel in my spine. The fire in my eyes. My phone buzzed. "Diana, you okay?" I thought about Logan's lost expression outside the coffee shop. About Clara's precise control over every detail. About Mason's constant absences. They thought they were destroying me, but they were showing me their weaknesses instead. "No," I typed back. "But I will be. Time to stop playing defense." Because now I knew the truth. This wasn't just about sabotaging my business. This was about power, control, and carefully guarded secrets. And if they wanted to play dirty, they'd learn I could dig up secrets too. Starting with whatever Logan was hiding from Ethan. Clara's annual charity gala was in full swing, the mansion's ballroom gleaming with old money and older secrets. I stood at the edge, watching Mason work the crowd while Logan hovered near the bar, checking his phone every few minutes. "Riley, darling." Clara materialized beside me, champagne in hand. "I do hope you're not planning to discuss your business tonight. Some of our guests are quite traditional about appropriate dinner conversation." Before I could respond, she'd already turned to a group of her friends. "Ladies, you remember Mason's wife? She's been staying with us since the renovation began, though I'm starting to wonder if we'll ever see the end of these repairs. Their laughter cut like glass. I caught Diana's eye across the room where she was photographing the event. She gave me a subtle nod. Everything was in position. Actually, I said, raising my voice slightly, I'd love to share some exciting news about my work. The room shifted, attention turning our way. Clara's smile froze. I'm launching a new wellness program, I continued, specifically designed for high-pressure corporate environments. In fact, several local businesses have already expressed interest. How entrepreneurial, Clara said, but I saw the flash of uncertainty in her eyes. This wasn't part of her script. Including the brewery, I added. Right, Mason? Mason looked up from his conversation, confusion crossing his face. We hadn't discussed this, hadn't discussed anything real in weeks. But before he could respond, Logan cut in. The brewery isn't exactly in a position to take on new programs right now, he said smoothly. Perhaps you haven't heard about the recent financial adjustments. Financial adjustments? I turned to Mason. You didn't mention any problems. The room had grown quiet, guests pretending not to listen. Mason's face flushed. It's nothing serious, just some temporary... Actually, Logan interrupted, as the brewery's financial advisor, I should point out that taking on additional expenses would be irresponsible right now. Financial advisor? The words hit like a physical blow. Since when? Oh, didn't Mason tell you? Clara's voice dripped concern. Logan's been helping with the books for months now. Such a blessing, having family you can trust with these things. I looked at Mason, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Diana's camera clicked softly in the background, documenting every moment of my public humiliation. Well, I said, forcing a smile, then you'll be interested in these. I pulled out my phone, pulling up the documents I'd spent weeks gathering. Some fascinating transactions I found while researching the brewery's public records. Logan's phone slipped from his hand, clattering on the marble floor. What are you talking about? Large withdrawals, irregular payments, missing inventory records. I scrolled through the screenshots, all coinciding with your new advisory role. The room had gone completely silent. Clara's champagne glass trembled slightly. You've been investigating my son? Her voice was deadly quiet. No, I said, meeting her gaze. I've been protecting my husband's business, though it seems I'm the only one who has. Mason finally stepped forward. Riley, this isn't the time. When is the time, Mason? When the brewery goes bankrupt? When your brother finishes bleeding it dry? Logan lunged for my phone, but I stepped back. Careful, Logan. Ethan's watching the live stream right now, along with several business journalists who might find these records interesting. You wouldn't dare, Clara hissed. Try me. I looked around the room at all the perfectly composed faces hiding their own secrets. I've got nothing left to lose. Can you say the same? The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Mason spoke, his voice hollow. Logan, tell me she's wrong. Logan's face crumpled for just a moment before his mask slipped back into place. Mother, I can explain. Not here, Clara cut him off sharply. She turned to her guests with a practiced smile. Please, enjoy the music. Family matter to attend to. As she herded us toward her study, I caught Diana's eye again. She nodded, camera still rolling. Whatever happened next, we had evidence. Mason touched my arm as we walked. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. Why didn't you? The study door closed behind us with a final click. Time to see who would break first. The video from Diana's camera played on my laptop screen, showing Clara's study from last night. Logan's confession, Mason's devastation, Clara's calculated damage control. I'd watched it 12 times since dawn, each viewing revealing new layers of their deception. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Messages from former clients, asking about my new online platform. The website Diana helped me build had gone live at midnight, right after the gala. Strength Through Adversity, a fitness program for women trapped in toxic family dynamics. My story, carefully edited, featured prominently. Clara appeared in my office doorway, still in her silk robe. Taking clients in person again? No need. I turned to the laptop so she could see the subscriber count climbing. Digital reaches more people, especially when they're sharing their own stories of controlling mother-in-laws. Her composure cracked, just slightly. You're using our family difficulties to promote yourself? Funny how you call embezzlement a family difficulty. I stood, matching her height in my workout shoes. Where's Logan? Trying to save what's left of his relationship with Ethan, no thanks to you. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Do you have any idea what you've done? Actually, I do. I pulled up the brewery's financial records. These numbers tell an interesting story. Want to hear it? Mason appeared behind his mother, looking like he hadn't slept. Riley, we need to talk. Now you want to talk? I kept scrolling through the documents. 3 months of missing inventory, 6 unauthorized wire transfers, all while you were too busy to notice your own brother stealing from you. It's complicated, he started, but I cut him off. It's really not. My phone buzzed again. Another subscription notification. Your mother convinced you to make Logan your financial advisor. He embezzled funds. You chose your family's reputation over the truth. Simple. Clara's hands gripped the doorframe. You have no right. I have every right. My voice stayed steady, even as my hands shook. I'm not just Mason's wife anymore. I'm a creditor. The brewery owes me money too, remember? All those personal loans I made to cover temporary shortfalls? Mason paled. Those were between us. Nothing's just between us anymore. I pulled up another document. I filed for an audit, professional forensic accountants this time, not family members. You can't, Clara whispered. I already did. I turned back to my laptop, where another client testimonial had appeared. Oh, look, someone else sharing their story of financial abuse by trusted family members. How timely. Mason stepped forward. Riley, please. We can fix this privately. Like you fixed it by hiding Logan's theft? By letting him sabotage my business while he drained your accounts? The words tasted like acid. How's that working out for everyone? My phone lit up with a text from Diana. Ethan just left Logan, heading to airport. Clara must have seen something in my expression. What have you done? Me? I smiled, feeling something cold and certain settle in my chest. I just shared the truth. The rest of you did this to yourselves. This isn't you, Mason said softly. You're not vindictive like this. You're right. I closed my laptop, tucking it under my arm. The old me would have kept quiet, tried to fix things privately, protected the family image, but you all taught me better. I walked to the door, where they still stood blocking my path. After a moment, they moved aside, not out of courtesy, but because they finally recognized the look in my eyes. The same look they'd given me for months. Cold, calculating certainty. Where are you going? Mason's voice cracked. To my new office downtown. My business is expanding faster than expected. I paused in the hallway. Oh, and Clara? The contractors called. Apparently there never was any structural damage. Funny how these family difficulties work out, isn't it? I left them standing there, surrounded by their crumbling empire of lies. My phone kept buzzing with notifications. New subscribers, shared stories, women finding their own strength through my journey. Diana was waiting in her car outside. You okay? I looked back at the mansion, at the perfect facade hiding so much rot. No, I said honestly. But I will be. And them? I thought about Mason's broken expression, Clara's shattered control, Logan's destroyed relationship. They'll survive. That's the problem with survivors. We always do. Diana started the car. Where to? Forward, I said, feeling the weight of vengeance settle into my bones. Always forward. The forensic accountant's report landed in my inbox at 3 a.m. I sat in my new office, surrounded by empty coffee cups and Diana's photos from the gala, reading numbers that made my stomach turn. The brewery wasn't just in trouble. It was bleeding out. My phone lit up with Mason's name. Third call tonight. I let it ring, focusing instead on the document that detailed exactly how his brother had systematically drained the business dry. Each transaction bore Logan's digital signature, approved by Clara's oversight. A knock at the door made me jump. Diana stood there, camera in hand. "You look like hell." "Thanks." I gestured to my screen. "Want to see what destroying a family legacy looks like in spreadsheet form?" She set 2 fresh coffees on my desk. "Mason's outside." My hands froze over the keyboard. "What?" "In the parking lot. Has been for an hour." She hesitated. "He's drinking." I pulled up the security feed. There he was, sitting in his car, head bowed over the steering wheel. The same position I'd found him in the night he told me about his father's death, about the weight of carrying on the family business alone. "The audit goes public tomorrow," I said, more to myself than Diana. "Once the banks see these numbers, they'll call in the loans." She finished my thought. "And everything Clara built." "Everything Logan stole," I corrected sharply. "Everything they tried to hide while destroying my reputation." My phone buzzed again, a notification from my fitness platform. Another surge in subscribers, more women sharing stories of family betrayal. My revenge was building its own momentum now, far beyond what I'd planned. Diana touched my arm. "Riley, when does it stop?" Before I could answer, the security feed showed Mason getting out of his car, stumbling slightly, heading for the building's entrance. "I should go," Diana said softly. "Unless you want me to stay?" I shook my head, eyes fixed on the screen. "I need to do this alone." Mason's footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. When he appeared in my doorway, I barely recognized him. His usual confident posture was gone, replaced by something hollow and desperate. "The bank called," he said without preamble. "They're reviewing our accounts." "I know." I kept my voice neutral. "That's what happens in an audit. Mother had a panic attack." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Logan's missing. Ethan's lawyer sent divorce papers. And I need you to stop." His voice cracked. "Please, Riley, whatever point you're trying to make." "Point?" I stood up slowly. "Your brother stole millions. Your mother covered it up. They destroyed my business, my reputation, while you stood by and watched. This isn't about making a point." "Then what is it about?" He stepped closer, alcohol heavy on his breath. "Because the woman I married wouldn't do this. She wouldn't—" "The woman you married died the day you chose your family's lies over her truth." I pulled up the audit report. "Want to see exactly how much your loyalty cost? It's all here in black and white." He stared at the screen, at the numbers that spelled out his family's destruction. "I can fix this." "No, Mason, you can't." I turned back to my work. "The audit goes public in 6 hours. The banks will foreclose. The brewery will fold. And your perfect family will finally face consequences." "We'll lose everything," he whispered. "I already did." The words came out softer than I intended. "Months ago, when you moved us into that house, I lost my husband, my business, my self-respect, but I found something else." "What?" "Power." I met his eyes. "The same power your family used against me, only I'm better at it." His face crumpled, and for a moment I saw the man I'd married. But then his phone buzzed, Clara's name on the screen, and his expression hardened into something familiar. Something that looked exactly like his mother. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "Probably." I turned back to my computer. "But so will you." After he left, Diana's words echoed in my head. When does it stop? Looking at my reflection in the darkened window, at the stranger I'd become, I realized I no longer knew the answer. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. A photo of Logan, passed out in some distant bar. The brewery's financial records scattered around him. Below it, 2 words that made my blood freeze. He confessed. The game was changing again. And this time, I wasn't sure anyone would survive the fallout. The brewery's security lights cast long shadows across empty fermentation tanks as I followed the sound of breaking glass. Logan stood in Mason's office, methodically destroying everything he could reach. Family photos shattered against walls. Awards clattered to the floor, decades of history reduced to shards. "Quite the confessions you made last night," I said from the doorway. "The video's trending." He didn't turn around, just grabbed another frame from Mason's desk. "Come to gloat?" "Actually, I came to return these." I set a stack of documents on the desk. Loan agreements, transfer records, every piece of evidence I'd gathered. Originals. You'll need them for your lawyer. That made him pause. What game are you playing? No game, just wondering if it was worth it. I picked up a broken photo. Logan and Mason at the brewery's opening, Clara beaming between them. Destroying your brother to please your mother. You don't know anything about my family. His voice cracked on the last word. I know Clara made you feel like nothing was ever good enough, that Mason got the brewery while you got the expectations. I met his bloodshot eyes. I know what it's like to be the outsider she never accepted. Don't! He hurled the frame against the wall. Don't pretend we're anything alike. We're not. You had choices. I didn't. I pulled up the viral video on my phone. Logan's drunken confession, his slurred words damning himself and Clara. But now neither of us has anything left to lose. The office door creaked. Mason stood there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Mother's been arrested. Logan's laugh was hollow. Perfect. Just perfect. Securities fraud, Mason continued. The board members pressed charges after seeing Logan's confession. They're investigating her role in covering up the embezzlement. I watched the brothers carefully, these men who'd been shaped by Clara's manipulation since childhood. She'll lose everything. We already have. Mason's voice was flat. The banks are foreclosing. The brewery's finished. Logan sank into Mason's chair, surrounded by the wreckage he'd created. I never meant... She said if I helped control the finances, proved myself worthy. She said a lot of things. I picked up another broken photo. My wedding day, before everything shattered. To all of us. Mason stepped closer, glass crunching under his feet. Why did you come here tonight? Because this has to end. I set my phone on the desk, the video still playing. Someone has to stop the cycle. By destroying us completely? Logan's laugh was bitter. Mission accomplished. No. I pulled up my fitness platform's homepage. By showing others they can survive it. Every woman Clara belittled, every relationship she poisoned, they're all finding their voice now. Your confession just gave them permission to speak. Mason touched the broken wedding photo. And us? What's left for us? Nothing. The truth hurt less than I expected. We're just cautionary tales now, examples of what happens when you let someone else's poison become your power. My phone buzzed. Diana, warning me that reporters were outside. The story was breaking nationally now, a viral sensation of family destruction and financial fraud. I should have protected you, Mason said quietly. From all of it. You should have protected yourself. I headed for the door, then paused. The forensic accountants found something else. Dad's original will, the one Clara helped you hide from Logan. Logan's head snapped up. What? The brewery was meant for both of you, equal partners. I left the document on the desk. Turns out Clara's been playing this game longer than any of us knew. The brothers stared at each other, years of manufactured competition crumbling between them. I left them there, surrounded by broken glass and broken trusts, and walked into the night where camera flashes were already starting to flare. Diana waited in her car. You okay? I looked back at the brewery one last time. My husband's legacy, my mother-in-law's weapon, my own instrument of revenge. No, but maybe that's the point. What do you mean? Some things have to break completely before they can be rebuilt. I touched my wedding ring, then slowly slipped it off. And some things should stay broken as reminders. The first reporters reached the brewery doors as we pulled away. Behind us, two brothers faced their mother's lies together for the first time. And somewhere in a police station, Clara was finally learning what it felt like to lose control. My phone lit up with another surge of followers, women finding strength in the wreckage of my revenge. I'd given them a voice, but at what cost? The answer would have to wait. Right now, there were still more truths to unveil, and the night was far from over. The mansion's auction drew a smaller crowd than expected. I watched from across the street as strangers picked through Clara's carefully curated life, each precious heirloom tagged with a price. Diana lowered her camera. You sure you don't want to go inside? Nothing in there belongs to me. I checked my phone. Another notification from my fitness platform. A woman sharing her story of breaking free from family control. Besides, I have a session to run. The headline caught my eye before I could look away. Brewery heir pleads guilty to fraud. Below it, a photo of Logan leaving court, Ethan notably absent. The comments section overflowed with stories of family betrayal, each one linking back to my platform. Riley? Mason's voice behind me. I hadn't heard him approach. The auction house needs your signature, I said without turning. Final dissolution of assets. I saw your TED Talk. He moved beside me, keeping careful distance, about toxic family dynamics and financial independence. Did Clara watch it from her cell? She's not allowed internet access. He paused. Logan's in therapy. Real therapy, not mother's kind. A crystal vase sold inside, the auctioneer's gavel echoing through open windows. I remembered Clara polishing that vase, telling me I wasn't worthy of its history. Your platform's helping people, Mason said softly. That counts for something. It counts for everything. I finally looked at him. That's what your mother never understood. Real power isn't about control. It's about impact. Diana's camera clicked, capturing the moment. She'd been documenting everything since the beginning, building an archive of destruction and redemption. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Thank you for showing me the truth. Attached was a photo of him in his new studio, finally creating art without Logan's shadow. The brewery property sold, Mason said. New owners want to turn it into a community center. Counseling services, support groups. Fitting. I watched another box of Clara's treasures carried to a waiting truck. A place of healing built on the ashes of control. I never apologized, he started, but I cut him off. Don't. I stepped back. We all made our choices. Now we live with them. Diana touched my arm. We should go. Your keynote speech. Right. I adjusted my blazer, power suit, not workout gear. My brand had evolved beyond fitness into something larger, something Clara had inadvertently helped create. You won, Mason said suddenly. Completely, totally. Was it worth it? I thought about my growing empire built on shared pain and recovery, about Clara's fall from grace and Logan's public redemption, about the thousands of women finding their voice through my story. Victory isn't the point anymore. I handed him the last document he needed to sign, our divorce papers. Understanding is. As we walked away, Diana showed me her latest photo. The mansion's facade reflected in shattered crystal, each piece catching light differently. For the book cover? Perfect! I glanced back one last time. Mason stood alone among his mother's broken legacy, holding our unsigned papers. My phone lit up with another notification, a message from a familiar number. Clara, somehow breaking her internet ban. I opened it, expecting threats or manipulation. Instead, just 2 words. You're stronger. Delete it? Diana asked, watching my expression. No. I pocketed the phone. Keep it as a reminder. Some victories don't need to be complete to be meaningful. The auction hammer fell one final time inside the mansion. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of the crystal vase's new owner, a young woman wearing workout clothes, her stance confident and unapologetic. Ready? Diana asked, camera raised for one last shot. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the weight of everything I'd gained and lost. Always. The photo she took would later go viral. Me walking away from the mansion, its windows reflecting not the past's broken pieces, but the future's endless possibilities. Clara's final lesson, taught unwillingly. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in destroying your enemies, but in transforming their weapons into tools of healing. My empire of strength grew not from the ashes of revenge, but from the seeds of understanding it left behind. And that, perhaps, was the most complete victory of all.
My name's Ellie, and if you were to look at my life now, you might not guess where I started. Born to a family that had more love than money, I learned early to stand on my own 2 feet. College was a dream too expensive to entertain, so straight out of high school, I was ringing up groceries at a local store. I turned 25, still punching that same clock, dreaming of something, anything, that might break the monotony. That's when Jack waltzed into my life. It was at a casual bash thrown by mutual friends. He had that easy smile and a way about him that just, I don't know, made you want to be around him. "Hey, I'm Jack. And who might you be?" he said, leaning against the kitchen counter with a beer in hand, eyes never leaving mine. "Ellie," I replied, trying not to show how his gaze made my heart race a bit. "Just Ellie." "Just Ellie, huh? Sounds like there's a story there waiting to be told." His charm was something else. He wasn't like the guys I knew, who mostly just grunted their way through conversations. Jack actually talked, laughed, and listened. We hit it off that night, talking about everything and nothing until the party dwindled and we were left under the dim porch light, reluctant to say goodbye. "You know, Ellie, I haven't had this much fun talking to someone in a long time. Can I see you again?" he asked, his tone hopeful. I nodded, feeling that flutter of excitement you get when something good begins. "Yeah, I'd like that." And see each other we did. Dates turned into a steady thing, and our steady thing turned into love, or at least, I thought it was love. 2 years later, Jack proposed at that same friend's backyard, under a sky lit up with stars. It was simple, no grand gestures, just him and me, and a ring that he was shaking to put on my finger. "You're it for me, Ellie. Marry me?" Of course, I said yes. I thought this was it, my happily ever after. The wedding was a modest affair, but filled with laughter and dancing. Our little apartment became the cozy nook of the world where we planned a future and built a life. Or tried to, anyway. Life doesn't always give you what you want, but sometimes it throws you exactly what you need. That's what I kept telling myself when I found out I was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but then, what good things in life are. I remember the morning I found out. The bathroom was steamy from my shower, and there I was, staring at a little stick that was about to tell me my future. Positive. My heart did somersaults. Excitement, fear, joy, panic, all of it mixing up inside me like a storm. Breaking the news to Jack wasn't easy. I knew money was tight, and babies? They don't just need love, they need diapers, clothes, and 1,000 other things we hadn't saved up for. But this felt right, if only to me. I waited for Jack to come home that evening. He was late, again. The clock ticked too loud as I rehearsed what to say. When he finally walked through the door, his face was tired, his shoulders slumped like he'd carried the world on them. "Jack, we need to talk," I started, my voice shaky. "What's up?" he asked, barely looking up as he dropped his keys on the table. I took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." Jack froze, his eyes finally meeting mine. There was a silence, heavy and thick, before he finally spoke. "Pregnant? Ellie, how did this happen?" I almost laughed. Almost. "Well, you know how it happens, Jack. I was careful, we were careful, but sometimes life has other plans." He ran a hand through his hair, looking around the room as if he'd find some answer, or escape, scribbled on the walls. "We can't afford a baby right now, Ellie. We just can't. Things are tight as is." I felt a sting at his words, but I pushed on. "I know money's tight, but we can make this work. People do with much less. And I want this baby, Jack, I want this more than anything." Jack shook his head, frustration lining his face. "It's not just about money, Ellie. It's about us. Are we even ready to be parents?" I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to find the man I married in those troubled blue eyes. "I am. I'm ready. I can do more, work more. We can figure this out. Please, Jack, say you're with me on this." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the fridge, opened it, and stared inside like he'd find some wisdom next to the leftover takeout. Finally, he shut it, leaned back against the counter, and sighed. "Ellie, I'm not saying no because I don't love you or the idea of a family with you. But think about our lives, how we struggle with just the two of us. Bringing a kid into this mess doesn't seem fair. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I blinked them back. Life's never fair, Jack. But it's ours to make better. I'm having this baby, with or without your blessing. I'd rather it be with, though. Jack looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. You're really set on this? Yeah, I am. The birth of our son Danny should have been the happiest moment of our lives, but for Jack and me, it was the start of the hardest times. Jack's absence grew more noticeable every day. He was either at work or just not there mentally when he was home. I remember one evening, a few months after Danny was born, I was rocking him back to sleep after a late-night fuss. Jack walked into the nursery, his face shadowed and tired. "Ellie, we need to talk," he said, barely above a whisper. I looked up, holding Danny a bit closer. "What's up?" My voice was tired, worn out from nights of little sleep and days filled with too much alone. "It's about this," he gestured vaguely around the room, his face strained. "It's about us, about me. I can't do this. It's too much." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean, you can't do this?" "Talk to me, Jack. What's going on?" Jack paced a few steps, then stopped, facing away from me. "I'm just overwhelmed. I'm always at work, and when I come home, there's just so much noise, so much need. I thought I could handle it, Ellie, but I can't. I'm not cut out for this father stuff." His words stung, but they weren't a surprise. I'd seen it, the distance, the disconnect. "So what are you saying? You want out? You want to leave your son?" "No, not leave," he struggled to find the right words. "I just need space, Ellie. I need to breathe." That's when I decided I needed more than just to wait around for Jack to come home. I started studying to become a nail technician. The local community college offered night classes, and my mom agreed to watch Danny. I'd study after putting Danny to bed, practicing on plastic hands until my own fingers ached. Finally, I got my license and set up a little studio right in our home. Converting our rarely used dining room into a salon, I started taking clients during the day. It wasn't easy juggling a new business and a baby, but it gave me a sense of purpose, something that was just mine. The money I made was modest at first, but it grew as my reputation spread. I poured my heart into every set of nails I did, every client I talked to. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being Ellie again, not just Danny's mom or Jack's wife who needed to be handled with kid gloves. When Jack got promoted to head the meat purchase department at the cannery, it meant we had to move. It was a big step up for him, but for me, it felt like starting from scratch all over again. We found a small house to rent in the new city, and I set up my nail salon right at home, hoping to attract some local clients. The adjustment wasn't easy. I spent days walking around the neighborhood, handing out flyers and introducing myself. Slowly, clients started trickling in, drawn in by word of mouth and my promise of a neighborly touch in their beauty routines. But Jack wasn't happy. One evening, after I'd finished with a client, he burst out, "Can't you take that stuff somewhere else? The house is always dusty, smells of your chemicals. I can't even relax in my own home." I was wiping down my table, and I stopped, looking at him. "This is how I make our living too, Jack. My clients are important to me." "Yeah, well, it's annoying," he snapped before storming out, leaving me standing in a silent house that suddenly felt too small for the both of us. Despite the rough start, my salon began to pick up. I was making good money, enough to think about renting a space outside our home. But the thought of starting in a new location, with the risk of not attracting enough clients, weighed heavy on me. One day, I mentioned it to Jack, trying to gauge his thoughts. "I'm thinking about renting a space for the salon. It might be better for us, for the house." He just shrugged, his mind on other things. "Do what you want, Ellie. Just make sure it doesn't come back to bite us." His indifference stung, but it was nothing new. Jack's life was changing too. With his bigger salary, he started taking more care of himself, hitting the gym, buying fancy clothes, and attending social events. Events I was never invited to. One night, he was dressing up for another one of those parties, and I couldn't help myself. I had to ask, "Why don't you ever take me with you?" He looked at me through the mirror, a frown lining his forehead. "Ellie, look at us. You're not cut out for that crowd. They're educated, polished. I can't be explaining my wife who does nails." As he left, the silence of the house wrapped around me. His words echoed in my head, fueling a fire I didn't know I had. I was tired of being the invisible support behind his shiny new life. That fire pushed me to take the leap. I used almost all of my savings, $70,000, to open my own salon in a small but bright space downtown. It was a gamble, a huge one, but I was done being just a background in Jack's life. At first, I worked alone. Long days filled with appointments, my hands constantly in motion. The salon slowly gained a reputation for quality and care, and soon, I had enough clients to hire 2 more technicians. One morning, as I was opening up the salon, Jack came in. It was early, and he looked out of place in his business suit among the pastel colors and nail polish racks. "What are you doing here, Jack?" I asked, surprised to see him. "I heard you hired more people." "Sounds like you're getting serious about this," he said, looking around with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "Yes, I am serious. This salon is going to succeed, with or without your approval," I said firmly, meeting his gaze. Jack smirked, a cold, humorless curl of his lip. "Just be careful, Ellie. Don't come crying to me if it all falls apart." As he left, I turned back to my salon, pride swelling in my chest. This was my place, my dream being built. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I felt ready for whatever challenges it might throw my way. That day started like any other in my salon. I was setting up for an afternoon of appointments, feeling good about where things were headed. Just as I was enjoying a rare quiet moment, the door chimed, and in walked Jack, my husband, with a woman I'd never seen before. She was polished, blonde, and carried herself with an air that filled the room. I thought maybe Jack had brought a new client, so I put on my best professional smile and went to greet them. "Hey Jack, who's this with you?" I said, keeping my tone light and friendly. Jack didn't return my smile. His face was all serious as he introduced her. "Ellie, this is Linda. She's going to be my wife." My heart skipped, stumbled, then plummeted. "You're what?" Linda looked at me, her gaze cold and dismissive. "Yes, I'm the CEO at the cannery where Jack works. We're getting married." The room spun a little. "Married? But Jack, what are you talking about? We're married." Jack's eyes were hard, not like the man I remembered marrying. "Ellie, I'm going to be filing for divorce. Linda and I, we're better suited for each other. She's smart, educated, wealthy." His words felt like punches, each one knocking the wind out of me. Linda chimed in, her voice dripping disdain. "It's rather unpleasant here, being surrounded by such simple pursuits." She looked around my salon with a sneer. "No offense, but I can't stand being next to mere staff who only clean other people's nails." Before I could find the words, she turned sharply on her heel. "You should know, you'll be evicted from your rented house soon. You and your son will have to live in shelters." They laughed together, a sound that seared itself into my memory, and then they left as quickly as they had come. I stood there, frozen, as the door closed behind them. The silence of the salon around me was suffocating. I couldn't stay there, I couldn't breathe. I cancelled all my appointments for the day and headed home, the weight of their words crushing me with every step. When I got to the house, it was too quiet. I found a note from Jack on the kitchen counter. He had written that I could stay in the apartment for 2 more months, before I needed to find another place. No apologies, just cold instructions, as if our life together meant nothing. The realization that I was alone, truly alone in this strange city with my son, hit me hard. I slid down against the wall, the paper crumpling in my hand, tears finally breaking through. How had everything come undone so quickly? But as I sat there on the floor, something shifted inside me. Anger simmered up, burning away the initial shock and hurt. I was down, but I wasn't out. Not by a long shot. I had my son to think about, a business that needed me. I focused all my energy on the salon. I started by blasting social media with posts, offers, and before and after photos of my clients. I printed flyers and distributed them all around the neighborhood, offering deals for first-time visits. It didn't take long for the word to spread and for my booking calendar to fill up. We were booked solid for 3 weeks straight, and I had never been busier or more motivated. I moved us into a small apartment right above the salon. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and it was enough. From our windows, we could see the life of the street below, and I liked the closeness of it all, work just downstairs, home up here. It felt compact, manageable. The divorce dragged on, ugly and draining. Jack claimed Danny wasn't his to get out of paying child support. That forced us into a DNA test, which only proved what I already knew: Jack was the father. The court didn't take kindly to his antics and ordered him to pay up for child support. It was a small victory in the midst of a lot of pain. Despite the chaos, the salon became my refuge. I threw myself into my work, arriving early to open up and staying late to clean up, making sure every part of the business ran smoothly. My hands were constantly in motion, painting, filing, shaping. It wasn't just about nails, it was about rebuilding my life, one appointment at a time. One late evening, as I was finishing up with my last client, Maria, she caught me off guard with a question. "Ellie, how do you do it? Stay so strong?" I paused, looking at her through the mirror, a smile tugging at the corner of my lips, despite the tiredness. "What choice do I have, Maria? Life doesn't stop for you, even when it feels like yours has stopped. My boy needs me, and I need to be strong for him." Every day was a battle, but every day also brought small victories. My client base grew, and the community's support was overwhelming. They came for the nails, but they stayed for the camaraderie, and my salon became a little sanctuary not just for me but for many of the women in the area. One afternoon, as I balanced my books, checking the numbers and planning for the future, I realized I was actually doing it. I was making it on my own. Financial independence was within reach, and it tasted sweeter because I knew every penny was earned through my own sweat and tears. The salon buzzed around me, filled with laughter and chatter, a stark contrast to the quiet of my legal battles and personal struggles. But it was this buzz that kept me going, that reminded me every day that no matter how tough things got, I had a community, a purpose, and a plan. As I locked up for the night, turning the sign to closed, I felt a sense of accomplishment wash over me. The street was quiet, the night settling in. I looked up at the apartment windows where Danny was probably asleep by now, and I felt a surge of determination. It was a regular Tuesday morning when the peace of my salon was disrupted by Laura, one of my regulars who lived in the high-rise across the street. She burst through the door, a look of distress etched across her face that I hadn't seen before. "Ellie, you won't believe what they're doing now," she gasped, clutching her purse tightly against her chest. "What's happened, Laura?" I asked, my hands pausing on the nail file I was holding. "It's the cannery, your ex's place. They've dumped a whole busload of illegal workers into our building, and now they're planning to set up temporary housing right in the park next door." Her voice was shaky, tinged with anger and worry. The news hit me like a truck. Not just because the park was where the neighborhood kids played, including my own son, but because of the sheer disregard for our community. My salon's clients, who were already seated and overhearing our conversation, began murmuring among themselves, their faces clouding over with concern. At that moment, something inside me clicked. I couldn't sit back and let my neighborhood be overrun and unsafe because of the cannery's irresponsible actions. I also saw a chance to right some wrongs Jack had helped bring about. "I'll tell you what we're going to do," I began, my voice growing firmer as I spoke to the room. "We're going to stand up to them. We're going to show them that they can't just push us around. We live here. Our kids play here. We matter." Heads nodded, and the room filled with a new energy, a collective resolve. I'm going to organize a meeting here, tomorrow. We'll plan our next steps. Tell your neighbors, bring your friends. We're stronger together, I declared. Over the next few days, I turned my salon into a makeshift community center. We created signs, drafted petitions, and planned peaceful protests. I led the charge, fueled not just by my civic duty, but by a deep-seated desire to challenge Jack and the destructive path he was part of. Then, one afternoon as we were preparing signs for another rally, Jack showed up at the salon, Linda in tow. They both looked unusually meek, a stark contrast to their usual haughty demeanor. "Ellie, can we talk?" Jack asked, glancing around at the bustling salon-turned-activist hub. I stepped closer, crossing my arms. "Sure, Jack. What's so important?" He glanced at Linda, who hesitated before pulling out an envelope. "We want to make you an offer, Ellie. This should cover all your troubles. Just stop this protest, let the cannery do its business." I peeked into the envelope she handed me. It was filled with $100,000. My heart raced, but my resolve didn't waver. "You think you can buy me off? Buy off our safety and well-being?" I scoffed, pushing the envelope back into her hands. "You can keep your dirty money. I'm not stopping until you pull back your plans for the park and treat your workers right." Jack's face hardened. "You're making a big mistake, Ellie." "No, Jack," I shot back, a steely edge to my voice. "The only mistake was thinking you could come here and push us around. I suggest you take your offer, turn around, and get out of this city while you still can." Linda, her face a mask of disbelief, turned on her heel, with Jack trailing behind her. They knew they were defeated, at least for now. It all escalated when Jack and Linda, blinded by greed, began tearing down trees in our local park to build housing for illegal workers. I couldn't just stand by. I took to social media, aired the issue on local TV, and the uproar that followed was louder than anything our town had ever seen. The story caught fire, and soon, even the governor was knocking on our door, or rather, the cannery's door. The state sent inspectors and the immigration service, who found more wrongs than rights. The plant was slapped with fines so steep that Jack and Linda's empire crumbled under the weight of legal debts. They were forced to sell the factory, and the new owners turned it around, offering legitimate jobs with decent pay to city residents. As for me, the community started calling me a hero, though I never felt like one. I was just a woman who loved her neighborhood enough to fight for it. 2 years after the dust had settled, Jack showed up at my salon. He was a shadow of the man I once knew, tired, older, and worn down by his choices. "Ellie, can we talk?" His voice was low, hesitant. I nodded, leading him to a private corner. "What is it, Jack?" I'm sorry, Ellie. For everything. I was wrong, so wrong. Can you ever forgive me?" His eyes searched mine, looking for a hint of the softness he once knew. "Jack, I forgave you a long time ago, for my sake, not yours. But forgive and forget are two different things. What we had is over, and it's staying that way." He nodded, a resigned slump to his shoulders. "Can I see Danny? I want to try to be a part of his life again." I hesitated, thinking of our son who had grown so much in the absence of his father. "I'll talk to Danny about it. If he wants to see you, then I won't stop him. But it'll be his decision." Later, when I asked Danny, he shook his head, his decision firm. "I don't know him, Mom. I don't want to." Jack had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it, far away from us. In the meantime, the salon grew into a chain. I wasn't just fixing nails anymore, I was setting standards in the beauty industry. The profits were more than I ever dreamed, but what truly fulfilled me was planning to open a network of schools teaching manicure techniques. Danny, now in high school, had taken up art, his talent blooming under the care of his teachers and his proud mom. Watching him at his easel, brush in hand, creating worlds more colorful and kind than the one we'd fought so hard to mend, I knew I'd made the right decisions. My boy was going to be all right. We both were. Dad always said, "Chloe, you're as tough as the old boots I fish in." And he wasn't wrong. Raised in a small town where the winter didn't ask if you were ready before it hit, I grew up pretty fast after Mom passed. All I got of her is a couple of pictures where she's smiling under the brim of Dad's fishing hat, her eyes kind of crinkling at the corners. Dad was a fisherman, started with a beat-up boat that looked like it'd sink if you sneezed too hard. But he had big plans, worked his fingers to the bone, and eventually built up a business that had our name slapped on a huge fish processing plant down by the docks. He was out before sunrise, back after dark, always smelling like the catch of the day. It wasn't like he left me to fend for myself though. Carol, my stepmom, came into our lives when I was about 7. She couldn't have kids of her own, so she poured all that pent-up love into me. We didn't always see eye to eye, especially when I hit those teenage years and got all prickly, but she stuck by me like glue. One night, I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my book spread out, and Dad came in, looking more tired than usual. Carol had fixed him his favorite, salmon, pan-fried just right, and he slumped down at the table, gratefully. "Thanks, love," he said to Carol, then turned to me with a look. "School going okay, kiddo?" "Sakai. Just boring," I shrugged, scribbling something in my notebook. "Boring," she says. "You hear that, Carol? Our girl's gonna be a genius, and she's bored." Dad chuckled, his eyes crinkling like Mom's in those old photos. Carol just smiled, ruffling my hair a bit too roughly. "She'd better be, with college costs these days." That was our life. Simple, sometimes a bit rough, but filled with enough laughter to keep the cold out. When high school was done, I was itching to see more than icy roads and fish. I told Dad I wanted to go to California for college. He wasn't too thrilled at first, all that distance, but he knew I had it in me to make something of myself. "California, huh? You'll melt out there." He'd joke, but one evening, he got serious. We were fixing one of the nets, hands all tangled up in ropes and seaweed. "Dad, I gotta go. It's not enough here for me," I admitted, not wanting to hurt him but needing him to understand. He was quiet for a long moment, just working the ropes. Then, he nodded. "All right, Chloe. You go make us proud. But promise you'll call your old man, huh?" So I went. Off to California with my dreams in one hand and a promise in the other. Maybe I was naive, maybe just young, but either way, I was ready, or so I thought. Stepping off the plane in California, the sun hit me like a slap in the face, warm and bright and relentless. Not a lick of the cold, harsh winds of Alaska. My first thought? Dad was right, I was gonna melt. College was a whole new world. Campus was buzzing with folks from all corners, talking fast about things I hadn't even heard of. I bunked with a girl named Jess, a local who took one look at my flannel and boots combo and said, "You're not in Alaska anymore, girl." "I can see that." I shot back, trying not to feel like a fish out of water. Jess laughed, a good, hearty sound. "You'll fit in just fine. Everyone does eventually." Classes kicked my butt at first. Economics isn't for the faint-hearted, and I had to hustle harder than I thought. Nights were long, coffee-fueled marathons with books and laptops. One day, slumped over a textbook in the library, a guy dropped into the seat opposite me. He had a smile that seemed too easy. "That looks intense. Preparing to take over the world?" "Just trying not to fail my midterms," I said, pushing up the glasses that had slid down my nose. "Ah, the humble student life. I'm Michael, by the way." He extended a hand, and I shook it, noting the firm grip. "Chloe. Nice to meet you," I replied, then went back to my books. Michael was in some of my classes, and we kept bumping into each other. We started having lunch together, sharing complaints about bosses and deadlines. Michael was easy to talk to, made me laugh more than I expected. It wasn't long before we started dating. He was different from the boys back home, smoother, more polished, but with a charm that felt genuine. A few months in, Michael's mom invited us over for dinner. I was nervous, smoothing down my dress, while Michael just grinned and told me, "She's going to love you." His house was nicer than I expected, and his mom, Linda, was all smiles and hugs. She was a bit intense, asking a million questions about Alaska, my dad's business, and my plans for the future. "So, Chloe, Michael tells me you're quite the catch, what with your economics degree and all. You thinking about the long haul with my son here?" she asked, her eyes sharp but not unkind. I choked on my water a bit, coughing while Michael clapped me on the back. "Mom, give her a break," he laughed, but Linda just waved him off. "I'm just saying, it's good to think about these things," she said, serving up more food than I could possibly eat. The night ended with Linda whispering to me as we said goodbye, "You're good for him, Chloe. I can tell." Driving back, Michael was quiet for a long time before he said, "So, what do you think? About us, I mean?" "I like where this is going," I said, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. "Let's see where it leads, okay?" "Okay," he agreed, and for the first time in a long time, California didn't feel quite so far from home. As I lay in bed that night, the distant sound of the ocean in my ears, I thought about Dad and Carol. They'd be happy for me, I figured. Happy that I was finding my way, making connections, maybe even building a future. The wedding was a blur, flowers, smiling faces, and a dress that felt a bit too tight. After all the dancing and cheers, when we finally settled into living at his mom Linda's house, reality started to set in. "Chloe, you'll see, it's easier this way. Mom needs us, and we can save up for our own place," Michael reassured me one evening as we unpacked our wedding gifts in what used to be his old room. "Yeah, I guess you're right," I replied, trying to sound more convinced than I felt. The room still had his high school trophies and old posters on the walls. It didn't feel like ours, it felt like I was just visiting. Things were fine for a while. Linda handled most of the house chores, letting me find my footing at my new job and in this new role as a wife. But about 6 months in, everything changed overnight. "I went to the doctor today, Michael. My back's worse, and he says I need to take it easy," Linda announced one night at dinner, her voice tinged with worry. "Of course, Mom. Chloe and I can take on more around the house, can't we?" Michael said, turning to me. I could only nod, my mind racing with what that meant. Before I knew it, Linda's version of taking it easy meant I was doing everything from cleaning to cooking, with her supervising from a kitchen chair. "You'll want to add more salt to that, dear. Michael likes his food with a bit more flavor," she'd say, watching me fumble around with the spice jars. One day, as I was elbow-deep in scrubbing the bathroom, Michael called me. "Hey, Chloe, Mom's really not doing well." I was thinking, maybe you should consider taking some time off work to handle things around here. I stopped scrubbing, the sponge dripping in my hand. "Take time off? Michael, I just started getting the hang of things there," I protested, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. "It's just temporary, babe. For Mom. We need to look out for her," he pushed, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. So, I did it. I quit my job, telling myself it was the right thing to do, the family thing. But days turned into weeks, and my job at the office turned into full-time housekeeping. Linda's health issues seemed to vanish when it came to critiquing my cleaning. I'd vent to Michael when he got home, but it was like talking to a brick wall. "She's just trying to help, Chloe. You know how she is," he'd say, brushing it off, making me feel smaller and more isolated each time. Every day was a marathon of chores. I scrubbed, dusted, and cooked with all the energy I could muster, but Linda always found fault. "You missed a spot there, just behind the couch. And use more elbow grease, will you? It's still not clean," she would say, her voice sharp, cutting through the hum of the vacuum cleaner. Cooking was another battlefield. No matter how carefully I followed recipes or tweaked them to what I thought were her tastes, Linda's verdict was the same. After barely tasting a dish, she'd push her plate away slightly and sigh. "Bland and tasteless, Chloe. You really should take some cooking lessons. Michael, ever his mother's son, only shrugged off my complaints. Mom said in her ways, Chloe. She just wants to help you get better at this stuff. He'd say, his words meant to soothe, but only adding salt to my wounds. His indifference stung almost as much as his mother's critiques. One fateful day, the old washing machine decided it had enough. I was halfway through a load of laundry when it shuddered, clanked ominously, and then stopped. Smoke wafted from the motor like a distress signal. The sinking feeling in my stomach matched the silence of the now-dead machine. Linda came rushing in, drawn by the noise. Her reaction was volcanic. Look what you've done now. That was a perfectly good washing machine, and you've broken it because you can't even operate a simple machine correctly. Her words were like daggers, and her voice rose with every syllable. I stood there, the smell of burnt motor mingling with my rising panic. Linda, it was very old. It was bound to break down eventually. I tried to explain, my voice meek against her tirade. That's nonsense. It worked fine before you started using it. This is coming out of your pocket, Chloe. You're costing us so much. She stormed out of the room, leaving me to stare at the defunct appliance, feeling smaller and more helpless than ever. Later, in the quiet of our bedroom, I broached the topic with Michael, hoping for some support or at least a recognition of the unfairness. The washing machine broke today. Your mom thinks I should pay for a new one, I said, my voice nearly a whisper. He didn't look up from his phone. Well, can you? It would really help out. I don't have that kind of money, Michael. You know I left my job. I reminded him, a desperate edge creeping into my tone. Then ask your dad. He can afford it, he replied casually, as if I were discussing buying a new dress rather than solving a crisis inflicted by his mother. The call to my dad was one of the hardest things I've had to do. I dialed the number, each tone heavy with dread. When he picked up, his voice was a bomb, but it only made things harder. Hey, kiddo. How's everything with you? Dad's cheerful greeting twisted my heart. Hi, Dad. I'm good, but, I need a favor. Can you help me buy a new washing machine? Ours just broke, I said, skipping over the hows and whys. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the whole truth, it felt too much like betrayal. Of course, Chloe. I'll transfer the money right away. Don't you worry about a thing, he replied, his willingness to help both a relief and a burden. When the money came through, Linda oversaw the purchase of a new, top-of-the-line washing machine, boasting of its features to anyone who would listen. Before long, things went from bad to unbearable. It started with her asking for money to cover minor repairs around the house, a leaky faucet here, a cracked tile there. But soon, those small demands escalated into full-blown renovations. Chloe, this house deserves to look its best. We need to live in a place that reflects our status, Linda would assert, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to upgrade her living room or the kitchen on a whim. I tried to resist, to suggest we budget or delay some of the work, but she brushed off my concerns with a wave of her hand. The first few times I called Dad to ask for money, I felt a knot in my stomach. He always answered with a smile, happy to see me, even if it was just on a screen. How's my girl? He'd ask, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I'm good, Dad. Listen, I need to ask for some help. We've got some repairs to do around the house, and well, it's a bit more than we can handle right now, I'd say, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad never hesitated, always quick to offer whatever help he could. Of course, kiddo. I'll transfer the money today. You just make sure you're taking care of yourself, alright? But Linda's demands grew. One video call turned into weekly sessions where she'd hover in the background, making sure I looked presentable. Put on some makeup, Chloe. Look lively for your father, she'd command, covering up the fatigue that had become my constant companion. It wasn't just the house that was being transformed. Linda decided she needed a new car, something more fitting for her status. And then, clothes from branded stores, because appearances matter, Chloe. Each request for money chipped away at my independence and my relationship with my father. I felt like a puppet, reciting lines Linda had given me. She made sure I never had a moment alone during those calls. If I even hinted at needing to talk to Dad in private, she'd find a way to interrupt or end the conversation quickly. Michael wasn't any help. He'd come home late, often smelling of booze, shrugging off my attempts to talk about how out of control things were getting. "It's what families do, Chloe. They help each other out," he'd slur, dismissing my concerns. Then I found out I was pregnant. It should have been a moment of joy, but my heart sank knowing how Linda would react. True to form, when I told her, her first response was not congratulations, but calculation. "This is wonderful news. Think of all the things the baby will need. You'll have to talk to your father, we'll need to set up a nursery, and babies need so much stuff," Linda enthused, already listing things to buy. Her excitement wasn't about the baby, it was about the new avenue for requests for money. "Make sure to look happy when you tell him. We want to make sure he's willing to help out with everything the baby needs," she instructed me before another choreographed call to my father. Sitting there, waiting for the screen to connect, I felt the lowest I had ever felt. I was about to bring a child into this mess, into this cycle of dependency and deceit that I couldn't seem to break free from. "Hey, Dad," I began, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "I have some news, I'm going to have a baby." Dad's face lit up, a genuine moment of happiness in the charade my life had become. "That's wonderful, Chloe. Absolutely wonderful. You know I'll support you in any way I can." Living with Linda and Michael had become unbearable, but it grew worse after the birth of my baby. The days and nights merged into an endless cycle of demands, criticisms, and exhaustion. Michael was hardly ever home, and when he did show up, his presence only added to the tension. "You've really let yourself go, haven't you?" Michael would sneer, eyeing me as if I were a stranger, not the mother of his child. "You look like an elephant. I can't even stand to sleep next to you." His words cut deeper than knives, leaving scars no one could see. I cried most nights, silently, the sobs shaking my body while I tried to muffle the sound with a pillow so as not to wake the baby or attract Linda's attention. The baby didn't sleep well, up at all hours, crying more often than not. I was running on fumes, every day a test of my endurance. One particularly tough day, I was so exhausted that I fell asleep while a casserole was in the oven. The smell of burning woke me, but not before Linda stormed into the kitchen. "What on earth are you doing? You're wasting food, Chloe. Do you know how hard I work to provide for this family?" Linda screamed as she yanked the blackened casserole from the oven. I just fell asleep for a moment. I didn't mean to," I stammered, trying to apologize. "No excuses. You're not eating today. Maybe that will teach you to pay attention," Linda decreed, her voice cold and unforgiving. I was stunned, the hunger already gnawing at me. But worse was knowing I needed nutrition to breastfeed my baby, who depended entirely on me. Yet, I felt powerless to argue with her, the fear of further reprisal keeping me silent. That same night, Michael came home drunk. He stumbled through the door, his eyes barely focusing on me as I tried to soothe our crying baby. "Can't you keep that child quiet?" he barked, his voice laced with venom. "I'm trying, Michael. He's just fussy tonight," I said, my voice weary, holding our baby a little closer. Unsatisfied and belligerent, Michael pushed me, his hand shoving against my shoulder hard enough that I stumbled and hit the doorframe. Pain shot through me, but my first instinct was to protect the baby in my arms. That moment crystallized everything for me. The fear, the pain, the desperation, I couldn't live like this anymore. Not for me, not for my baby. This wasn't a home, it was a prison. Michael's stumble seemed minor to him, but to me, it was the last straw. Waiting for the right moment to leave was the hardest part. I watched the clock tick, each minute stretching endlessly until the notification came, another transfer of money from my dad. It was then I knew I had to make my move. Michael and Linda were both out for the day, and the house felt strangely silent, almost like it was holding its breath along with me. I dressed quickly, pulling on my old warm jacket and wrapping my baby tightly in his blanket. Every movement was calculated, silent, the fear of them coming back early gnawing at my insides. I grabbed a small bag that I had packed days ago, the essentials only, some clothes for me, and the baby in diapers. With my baby secured in my arms, I stepped outside, locking the door behind me one last time. The taxi ride to the airport was a blur, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I kept looking over my shoulder, paranoid that Michael or Linda might pull up behind us. At the airport, I bought the tickets, my hands shaking as I handed over the cash. The amount drained nearly all the money I had, but it didn't matter. We were going to be safe, we were going to be free. I turned off my phone, cutting off any chance they had to track me down or persuade me to come back. Landing in Alaska was like stepping into another world. The biting cold slapped me awake from the haze of anxiety and fear that had clouded my mind. I hailed another taxi and gave the driver my dad's address. As we drove, the familiar landscapes of my childhood rolled past, each mile bringing a surge of memories and a flicker of hope. I arrived at my dad's house late at night. The porch light was a beacon in the darkness. With my baby now asleep against my chest, I walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. The wait felt like an eternity. Then, the door swung open, and there was my dad, his face etching from confusion to shock as he took in my appearance, exhausted, disheveled, my eyes swollen from crying. "Chloe, what's happened? Are you okay?" His voice was laden with concern. Tears streamed down my face as I stepped inside. "Dad, I had to leave. I couldn't stay there any longer. Please, I need your help." He didn't ask any more questions. He just wrapped his arms around me and my baby, pulling us into the warmth of the house. Carol came down the stairs, her expression turning from sleepy curiosity to alarm as she saw me. "Oh, Chloe," she gasped, rushing to embrace us. "What's going on?" I broke down, the story pouring out of me in between sobs, the control, the isolation, the despair, Michael's indifference, Linda's manipulation. They listened, their faces growing grim with every detail. Without a word, Dad stepped away and came back with his phone in hand. He dialed with a steadiness that belied his age. "I'm calling the police, and then I'm getting the best lawyer we can afford. We're going to fix this, Chloe. You're safe now. You're home." The courthouse was a blur of activity, but inside, the world seemed to slow down as I took the stand. Giving my testimony against Michael and his mother, Linda, was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. My voice shook as I recounted the details of the abuse and manipulation, but I felt a strength I didn't know I had, fueled by the desire to protect my child and reclaim my life. The judge's gavel sounded like a shot of finality when he fined Michael for his abusive behavior. It wasn't just a victory for me, it felt like justice for every silent moment I had endured under his and Linda's control. The divorce papers came through not long after. Signing them brought a mix of relief and sorrow. This wasn't how I had envisioned my marriage ending. But as I scribbled my name, I knew it was the first step toward a new beginning. Mr. Jenkins, our lawyer, was relentless. He dug through financial records and bank statements, piecing together the puzzle of how my father's money had been siphoned off to fund Linda's lavish tastes and renovations. The evidence was undeniable, and the court ordered that every penny be returned. The total came to over $230,000. Neither Michael nor Linda had the means to pay it back outright. The news of their deceit spread quickly among their friends and the local community, tarnishing their reputations severely. Michael struggled to find any substantial work after that, his previous employers distancing themselves from the scandal. In the end, they were forced to sell the house, Linda's pride and joy, the symbol of their greed. They moved into a small, cramped apartment in a less desirable part of town. Linda had to pick up a job at a local grocery store, a far cry from the leisurely life she had manipulated to maintain. Custody of my son was granted to me without contest. Michael was ordered to pay alimony, which he does, albeit begrudgingly. It's not about the money, though. It's about providing a stable and loving environment for my son, something I am now able to do back in the safety and comfort of my father's home. As I watch my son play in the yard, his laughter mingling with the wind, I feel a surge of hope for the future. The legal battles, the escape, the recovery, it's all behind us now. We've emerged stronger, bound by a resilience forged in the fires of adversity. I had been on my own since my parents passed away while I was in medical school, pushing me to rely solely on myself to carve out a future I could be proud of. After years of non-stop work, scrimping, and saving every extra penny, I finally managed to buy a townhouse. It wasn't just any townhouse, it was the culmination of my blood, sweat, and tears, sitting pretty in a decent neighborhood with a view of a cheerful little kindergarten across the street. The morning I bumped into Mark was like any other, except it wasn't. I'd grabbed my usual coffee from the corner cafe, a place where the barista knew my order by heart and didn't need to ask. Coffee in hand, I was lost in thoughts of my next shift at the hospital when it happened. I turned to leave and collided with someone, sending my hot coffee splashing all over both of us. "Jesus, watch where you're going," the guy exclaimed, a frown creasing his brow as he looked down at his soaked shirt. I felt my cheeks heat up with embarrassment. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. Here, let me help you clean that up," I stammered, feeling around my bag for some napkins, coming up empty. "Great." He sighed, then shook his head as he caught my flustered expression. "It's all right, no harm done. But I'm pretty sure these stains won't just wipe off with a napkin." "You're right, I'm so sorry. There's a laundromat around the corner. I can pay for the cleaning, it's the least I can do." He raised an eyebrow, then a small, amused smirk played on his lips. "Lead the way then, coffee spiller." As we walked to the laundromat, the initial awkwardness gave way to a more relaxed conversation. He introduced himself as Mark, a realtor who had just moved into the area. "What about you? I haven't seen you around before," he said as we handed his shirt over to the laundromat attendant. "I'm Ella," I replied. "I live just a few blocks from here. And yeah, usually I'm holed up at the hospital or resting at home, so not much of a local social butterfly." We sat down at a nearby diner while waiting for his shirt. Over a couple of coffees, carefully kept at a safe distance from him this time, we chatted about mundane things like work and our neighborhood. It was refreshing, talking to someone new without any pretensions. "Look, Ella," he said as we walked back to pick up his shirt, now stain-free, "I owe you one for helping me out. Let me take you out for dinner, my treat. No more coffee disasters, I promise." I hesitated for a split second. He seemed genuine, and after the morning's debacle, I felt like I could use a night out. "All right, Mark, it's a deal. But if this is some elaborate scheme to get free medical advice, you'll be disappointed." "Don't worry, I'll try to keep it strictly non-medical." "How's Friday night?" "Friday works. It's a date then," I said, handing him his shirt. We exchanged numbers, and as I watched him go, I couldn't help but think maybe this strange encounter might just be a good thing. After that accidental coffee spill and the subsequent shirt rescue mission, Mark and I began to see more of each other. It started with that promised dinner, which turned out to be a delightful evening at a local Italian place he swore was the best in town. Mark was easy to talk to, and for a guy who sold houses for a living, he sure knew a lot about a lot of things. As the evening wound down, he looked at me, a playful challenge in his eyes. "So, life-changing enough for you?" I laughed, nodding. "All right, you win this round." The pasta was fantastic. From then on, it seemed like we were inseparable. He was always planning something interesting for us to do, whether it was a movie night, a visit to a local art exhibit, or just a simple walk in the park. Mark had a knack for making everyday things feel special. One evening, as we were walking along the river, watching the city lights reflect on the water, he stopped and looked at me with those earnest eyes of his. "Ella, I've got to tell you something." "What's up?" I asked, feeling a mix of anticipation and nerves. I'm falling pretty hard for you, he said, his voice low. And I don't want to scare you off, but I feel like this could be something real. I took a deep breath, the night air cool on my face. I'm falling too, Mark. And no, you're not scaring me off. A few months into our whirlwind romance, during a cozy dinner at my place, Mark had insisted on cooking to prove he could rival the pasta from our first date. He surprised me with a question that stopped me dead in my tracks. He had just served us some ridiculously good lasagna when he turned to me, took my hands in his, and said, "Ella, I know it's been a quick ride for us, but when you know, you just know. Marry me?" I didn't need time to think about it, it felt right. Yes, Mark. Yes, I'll marry you. That night, we talked about our future, about finding a place together, and starting a family. Everything felt like it was falling into place, and I couldn't remember the last time I had been this happy. However, the arrival of Mark's parents from Thailand just before our wedding brought a shift I hadn't anticipated. They had lived abroad for many years but decided to return permanently when they heard about their son's imminent wedding. At first, they seemed lovely, full of warm smiles and enthusiastic embraces. "We're so thrilled to finally meet the woman who captured our Mark's heart," his mother had gushed, squeezing my hands with both of hers. His father, a robust man with a hearty laugh, clapped Mark on the shoulder, saying, "You've chosen well, son. We're excited to be part of this joyous occasion." Their friendliness was comforting, and I felt hopeful about our new family dynamics. But their initial friendliness soon gave way to an overwhelming sense of intrusion. Linda, Mark's mother, took to our home like she owned the place, and her husband, Jim, wasn't far behind in making his presence felt. It started with small things. Linda would rearrange my kitchen whenever she came over, which was almost every day. "Ella, you really should keep the spices near the stove. Saves time," she would say, moving things around without waiting for my response. I bit my tongue, trying to keep the peace. Then came the comments about how I managed the house. One afternoon, while I was trying to relax with a book, Linda plopped down next to me and sighed. "You know, dear, it wouldn't hurt to dust a bit more often. And maybe some fresh flowers would brighten up the place. It looks a bit drab." Jim had his own way of butting in. He'd follow Mark around, questioning his decisions about work and our finances. I overheard him one day in the garage, his voice stern. "You're letting her handle the money? You need to keep an eye on that, son. Make sure it's spent wisely." Their constant presence was suffocating, but the breaking point came when Linda decided we should host a party for her friends, without even asking us. "It'll be just a small gathering," she assured, waving her hand dismissively as if it was no big deal. When I tried to talk to Mark about it, hoping he would intervene, he just shrugged. "Mom likes to host. Let her have this one. It makes her happy, and it's not like it's a huge imposition, right?" I gave in. The small gathering turned out to be a full-blown bash with more than 20 people, all from Linda's circle of friends, who seemed to think they were at some sort of weekly social club that just happened to be in my living room. I spent the whole day cooking and preparing, only to end up feeling like a stranger at my own party. Linda introduced me around as if she was the lady of the house, and I was just some sort of assistant. "Ella helped out," she would say, patting my arm while her friends nodded politely before turning back to her. The final straw was when I heard one of her friends, a loud woman with a booming laugh, comment, "Linda, you've got this place whipped into shape. Mark was smart to bring you back here." I clenched my fists, my face hot with embarrassment and rage. As soon as the last guest left, I turned to Mark. "This can't happen again. It's not okay, and you know it." He looked tired, rubbing his forehead. I know. It's just. Mom can be a lot. But what am I supposed to do? She's my mom." "But I'm your wife," I shot back, the hurt clear in my voice. "That should count for something, shouldn't it?" He didn't have an answer for me, and that night, I lay awake, wondering if this was how the rest of my life would look. Sidelined in my own home, bending backward to accommodate people who clearly had no respect for my boundaries. Saturday after Saturday, my house transformed into a hub for Linda's endless social gatherings. Every week, the invasion of her friends, along with their opinions and laughter, grated on me more. It wasn't just the noise or the mess, it was the sheer disregard for our personal space. And each event left me feeling more like an outsider in my own home. The day I put my foot down, everything blew up. I told Linda politely but firmly, "I'm sorry, but we can't host the party every Saturday. It's too much." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Her reaction was immediate and volcanic. "Too much? You ungrateful girl, this is what family does for each other. We host, we entertain, we support." Her voice rose with each word, and I felt the walls of my own home closing in on me. "Linda, please lower your voice. Let's talk about this calmly." But calm was nowhere on her agenda. Her face turned a shade of red I'd only seen in movies. She started pacing around, waving her arms, and then, to my horror, she began throwing decorative cushions across the room as if each one bore my face. "You listen here. If you don't agree to these small favors, I can make things very difficult for you, my girl." She was shouting now, and her words sliced through any pretense of familial warmth we might have had. When she threatened to have me divorced from her son if I didn't comply, a cold shiver ran down my spine. "Mark will listen to me. He always has. Don't think he'll choose you over his own mother." I was reeling. The woman was using divorce as a weapon to keep me in line. It hit me then, how deeply Mark was tied to his mother's apron strings. The realization was like a punch to the gut. Mark, hearing the commotion, rushed into the room. "Mom, what's going on here?" He looked from his fuming mother to me, his eyes wide with confusion. "Your wife is being unreasonable, Mark. I'm only asking for a little cooperation, and she's denying us that." Mark glanced at me, his face pleading for peace. "Ella, can't we just—" "No, Mark, we can't." My voice was firm, stronger than I felt. "This isn't about a party. It's about respect and boundaries. Your mother just threatened to break us up." Mark's eyes flickered with shock, first at me, then at his mother. "Mom, you didn't." Linda's gaze didn't waver, she was ready for battle. "I did, and I will if she doesn't start showing some respect around here." She turned around and left the room, slamming the door loudly. Taking a deep breath, I made a choice, a radical one. "Mark, I think we need to separate. Not for real, just on paper. We need to show your mom that we make our decisions together, not under duress." It took a lot of convincing, a lot of tearful discussions, and heartfelt promises that this was just a tactic, not the end for us. So, we did. We filed for divorce quietly, a sham for freedom. It was the hardest decision of my life, pretending to split from the man I loved to save our marriage from the overbearing clutches of his mother. The next Saturday, when Linda and her entourage of friends showed up at the house for their usual gathering, they were in for a surprise. I was waiting for them on the front porch, my posture rigid and my resolve firm. As Linda stepped out of her car, her smile faded when she saw me standing alone, door firmly shut behind me. "Ella, dear, aren't you going to let us in? We have our little gathering, remember?" Her voice carried that familiar commanding tone, but today, I was not going to yield. "No, Linda. There won't be any gathering here today. Or any other day," I replied, my voice steady. She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about? This is my son's house, and I decide." "It was your son's house," I corrected her sharply, cutting off her words. "And as of last week, it's mine alone. We're divorced, Linda. Mark isn't living here anymore, and he won't be a part of these gatherings." Her mouth fell open, disbelief etching her features. "Divorced? That's not possible. Mark would never." "He did, Linda. And he agreed it was for the best," I said, not letting her intimidate me anymore. The power I felt at that moment, reclaiming my space and my life, was exhilarating. This is nonsense, she exclaimed, her voice rising. I'll call him right now. He'll straighten this out. Linda fumbled with her phone, her fingers shaking slightly as she dialed Mark. I could hear the dial tone, then Mark's voice answering. The conversation was brief, and Linda's face fell with each word Mark spoke. Turning back to me, her eyes filled with fury, she hissed, "You're ruining our family. You have no idea what you've just started." "I know exactly what I'm doing, Linda. I'm ending the chaos you bring into my life every week. This is my home, and I will not be hosting or accommodating your social life anymore." The other women, who had been watching the exchange with rapt attention, began to murmur among themselves, their eyes darting between Linda and me. With a huff, Linda turned on her heel, her friends trailing behind her like lost puppies. They got into their cars and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and a profound silence behind. After the sham divorce, Mark and I maintained our relationship secretly, meeting in less conspicuous places and spending time together like two teenagers sneaking around. It was absurd and painful, but necessary. One chilly evening, Mark texted me, "Meet me at the Old Town Diner. The one with the busted neon sign. Need to see you." Reading his message, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. I threw on my coat and headed out, making sure to keep my head down as I walked into the diner. It was a quiet place, mostly forgotten by the town's newer residents, which made it perfect for us. As I slid into the booth across from Mark, I could see he was tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Hey," I whispered, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "Hey," he whispered back, a small smile breaking through his fatigue. "I've missed you." "Me too," I said, my heart aching a bit. "How are you holding up?" Mark sighed, his gaze dropping to our intertwined hands. "It's been hard, Ella. Not seeing you, not being able to just come home. Mom's been, well, she's been herself." I nodded, knowing all too well how overbearing Linda could be. "But we're doing the right thing, right? Keeping our distance, for now, to make her see we're serious about needing space?" "Yeah, we are. It's just tougher than I thought." Mark squeezed my hand a little tighter. "But how about you? How have you been handling the house all alone?" I shrugged. "It's been okay. Quiet. Peaceful, even. I just miss having you there. The house feels empty without you." The waitress came by then, dropping off 2 mugs of coffee and a plate of fries. We both thanked her and waited for her to leave before continuing. "Ella, I've been thinking," Mark said, breaking a fry in half. "Maybe we should start looking for a place of our own. Somewhere new, where we can start fresh, away from all this drama. A new place." The idea was both thrilling and daunting. "I like that idea. But what about the money? And the house?" "We'll figure it out," he said confidently. "I can handle the house, maybe even talk to a realtor about putting it on the market. As for money, well, we've always been good at managing that together." "True," I agreed, feeling a spark of hope at the thought of a new beginning just for us. "Let's do it. Let's find our own place, something that's just ours." We spent the next hour talking about potential areas to live in, types of houses we liked, and how we'd decorate our new place. It felt good to dream together, to plan a future that seemed a little brighter than the past few months had been. When it was time to leave, we stood outside the diner, the cool air making me shiver slightly. Mark took off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. "I've got you," he said softly, pulling me into a hug. "I know," I whispered back, holding him tight. "And I've got you, too." We parted ways that night with a plan in mind, our spirits lifted by the promise of a new start. It wouldn't be easy, but with Mark by my side, I felt like we could handle anything. Even Linda. A year later, our persistence paid off. I had managed to save enough money, and Mark, using his skills as a realtor, found us the perfect place. It was a large, beautiful house in a wonderful area with a stunning garden. To celebrate and cement our reunion, we decided to get married again in a small, secret ceremony. It was just us and a couple of close friends who knew about our situation. As we exchanged vows for the second time, the weight of the past year seemed to lift. There were still remnants of our old life at the townhouse that we needed to gather up. We decided one Saturday morning to make the trip back to our old place and pick up the last few items. As we pulled up to the townhouse, I noticed a familiar car parked outside. It was Linda and Jim. They were standing by the front door, apparently waiting for us. When we got out of the car, Linda's face lit up with an unsettling kind of eagerness. "We need to discuss the family get-togethers. Now that you're returning, we can start planning the next one right here." Mark's brow furrowed. "Mom, we're not here to stay. We're just picking up some things. We've moved out." Her smile faltered for a moment but quickly recovered. "Moved out? Oh, but that means this place is free. I can use it for the parties then." It was like nothing had changed with her. I felt a flare of frustration but kept my voice calm. "Linda, we sold the townhouse. It's not ours anymore. We're here to collect the last of our things." The news seemed to take a moment to sink in. Linda's face went from confusion to shock, and then to a frown. "Sold? But where will you live? Where will we have our gatherings?" Mark took a step forward, his tone firmer. "Mom, the townhouse is no longer our concern. And we're not disclosing where our new house is. I'm sorry for how things went before, but now, we're starting fresh. It's time for you and Dad to consider doing the same. Maybe travel again, like you used to." Linda's mouth opened and closed, her earlier enthusiasm dampened into a muted disbelief. Jim, who had been quietly observing the exchange, put a hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off, her gaze fixed on Mark. "You're choosing her over your own family?" Linda's voice cracked, a mix of anger and hurt. Mark nodded. "Yes, Mom, I am choosing my wife. It's not about picking sides, it's about respecting our life together." Before Linda could say another word, Mark kissed my hands, an affirmation of his commitment in front of his parents. Linda stood frozen, her face a mask of frustration and disbelief. Jim seemed to realize the argument was lost and gently urged her back towards their car. After settling into our new home, the peace and quiet I had longed for felt like it was finally within reach. Mark and I reveled in our newfound privacy, cherishing the freedom that came with it. However, Linda wasn't ready to let us go without a fight. Her obsession with controlling us reached new heights when she started calling our friends, desperately trying to find out where we lived. Thankfully, our friends understood the situation and kept our new address confidential, supporting our decision to keep our lives private. Linda's frustration grew with each unsuccessful attempt, and soon she resorted to more direct confrontations. The phone calls began to increase, each one more demanding and invasive than the last. Mark and I decided early on that engaging with her would only encourage her behavior, so we started to ignore the calls. This seemed to infuriate her even more, pushing her to take drastic measures. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the hospital, I was walking to my car when I spotted Linda lurking near the staff parking lot. My heart sank as I realized she was waiting for me. As I approached, her face twisted into a mix of anger and determination. "Ella, you can't ignore me forever. Tell me where you live." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet evening air. I kept my distance, my hand inching towards my phone. "Linda, this needs to stop. You're not welcome here, and you're certainly not welcome in our lives if you continue this behavior." She scoffed, stepping closer, her presence more threatening. "You think you can just shut me out? Mark is my son. I have rights." I could feel my patience wearing thin, and my concern for my own safety growing. "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling security. This is harassment, Linda." Her eyes narrowed, not believing I would take a stand. "You wouldn't dare." Without another word, I pulled out my phone and dialed security. Within minutes, a security officer arrived, and I quickly explained the situation. Linda was still ranting as the officer approached us. The security officer stepped in, firmly. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises now. you are causing a disturbance." Linda's face flushed with anger, but the presence of security seemed to push her back into reality. She glanced between me and the officer, her resolve faltering. "This isn't the end," she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction as she turned and hurried away. After the incident, I warned her that if she approached me again, I would not hesitate to involve the police and press charges for harassment. It seemed my firm stance finally made an impact. Linda's attempts to contact us abruptly stopped. Weeks later, Mark and I were relieved to hear from a mutual friend that Linda and Jim had decided to move back to Thailand permanently. The news brought a profound sense of relief. It felt like the final cloud hanging over our new life had been lifted, allowing us to truly start afresh. My name's Julie. Life threw me a curveball when I was just 9. Dad had been sick for a while, but I didn't really get what was happening until he was gone for good. One day he was there, the next day just an empty space at the dinner table. Mom didn't take long to fill that space. Within a few months, she brought home Frank. I guess loneliness hits hard and fast. Frank moved in like he owned the place, and it was clear he wasn't keen on having me around. "Julie, this is Frank. Frank, this is my daughter, Julie." Mom introduced us the day he moved in. His look was cold, like he'd rather be anywhere else, but here looking at me. "Hi," I managed, a bit shy but trying to be polite. Frank just nodded, didn't even smile. He turned to Mom. "Sarah, can we talk about the living arrangements?" I remember feeling a chill as they walked away, his hand on her shoulder. It wasn't long before I started feeling like an outsider. Frank had rules for everything, and he was always on my case. "Don't leave your stuff in the living room," "eat faster," or "too much noise." It was relentless. Mom did nothing. She just nodded along with whatever Frank said, her eyes empty, or maybe just tired. One evening, things boiled over at dinner. I had accidentally knocked over a glass of water, and it spilled towards Frank. "Clumsy kid. Can't you do anything right?" Frank snapped, jumping up as the water splashed his pants. "Sorry, Frank. It was just an accident," I stammered, feeling my face heat up. "Sorry doesn't clean up messes, Julie. Be more careful," he scolded, his voice raised more than necessary. Mom just sat there, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, silent. I looked at her, hoping she'd say something, anything in my defense. But nothing came. After dinner, I heard them arguing in their room. Frank's voice was loud and harsh. "Sarah, that kid of yours needs to shape up. I'm not gonna live in chaos just because you're used to it." Mom's reply was soft, but I caught bits of it. "Frank, please. She's just a child. She's still adjusting." "Adjusting? It's been months. I'm telling you, if things don't change." I didn't hear the rest, but I didn't need to. The message was clear. Frank wanted me out of the way, and Mom wasn't fighting too hard against the idea. The next few months were just as tough. Frank's complaints were a daily soundtrack, and Mom's silence grew heavier. I was walking on eggshells, trying not to make a sound, disappear if I could. But you can't disappear in your own home, can you? Even a 9-year-old knows that much. Life at home got trickier when Mom told us she was expecting. Frank already had his hands full just tolerating me, and the news didn't exactly make him jump for joy. He was silent for a long minute before he spoke, and when he did, his words were clipped and cold. "Well, that's just great, Sarah. Just what we needed," he said, his tone dripping with something that sounded a lot like sarcasm. Mom just smiled, a bit too weakly. "It's a blessing, Frank. You'll see. A fresh start for us." I remember feeling a mix of excitement and dread. A little brother or sister seemed like a dream, someone new to connect with, but with Frank's mood swings, I wasn't so sure. Months flew by, and the baby finally arrived. It was a girl, and they named her Anna. I was thrilled. She was tiny, and when I first saw her, all wrapped up in her pink blanket, my heart melted. I thought having Anna around might make things better, even make Frank soften up a bit. Holding Anna felt magical. She was so small, her tiny fingers grasping at nothing. "Hey there, Anna. I'm your big sister, Julie. I'm gonna take good care of you," I whispered, promising silently to be there for her, no matter what. But the magic didn't last. Bringing Anna home changed the dynamics again. Frank was fussier than ever, especially about money. One night, about a week after Anna came home, I overheard him talking to Mom in the kitchen. His voice was harsh, louder than it needed to be. "More expenses, Sarah. Diapers, formula, God knows what else. And what about Julie? She's not even mine, and I'm footing the bill for her too?" Mom's voice was a quiet murmur. "Frank, please, she's just a child. We can manage. Things will settle down." "It's not just about managing, Sarah. It's about priorities. We need to think about our family now. Our real family." I knew what that meant. I wasn't real family. The sting of those words hit me hard. I slid down the wall, by my door, hugging my knees, trying not to cry. The final straw came when Frank sat us down in the living room one evening, his face serious, his eyes avoiding mine. "Sarah, we need to think about the future. Julie's getting older, and expenses are piling up. Maybe it's time she went to live with her Aunt Claire." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Sent away? Just like that?" Mom finally spoke, looking at me, her eyes sad. "Julie, honey, it might not be so bad. Aunt Claire has a nice house, and you'll be well taken care of. But Mom, I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you and Anna." The room went silent. Frank's next words were cold and final. "It's decided then. I'll call Claire in the morning." Moving in with Aunt Claire was like stepping into a different world. Her house was big, clean, and always silent. Too silent for comfort. The first day I arrived, she laid down her laws like we were setting terms for a peace treaty after a long war. "You'll follow my rules under my roof, Julie. No nonsense, no mess, no backtalk," she declared as she led me through the hall, to what would be my room. The room was plain, with bare walls and a single bed against the corner. It felt nothing like home. I nodded, too tired and too upset to argue. Homework right after school, chores before dinner, and lights out by 9. I won't tolerate any laziness or sloppiness, you hear? Aunt Claire continued, her voice firm. "Yes, Aunt Claire," I responded, my voice a whisper. "Speak up when you're spoken to. Let's have no mumbling here," she snapped. I quickly corrected my tone. "Yes, Aunt Claire. I understand." The days that followed blended into each other, each as strict and unforgiving as the last. Aunt Claire was tough, tougher than anyone I'd ever known. She had a way of making simple conversations feel like interrogations. Homework was a battlefield too. If I got a B instead of an A, Aunt Claire had words that stung sharper than any I'd heard before. "You can do better than this. Your laziness won't fly here," she'd scold, even though I'd spent hours poring over books. The worst was how she reminded me of my mom's decision to send me away. If I dared to talk back or ask for less criticism, she'd retort sharply, "No wonder your mom sent you here. You need discipline you obviously weren't getting." Those words hurt. They always did. They made me feel unwanted, unloved, like I was just another problem Mom had to solve by shipping me off. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I learned to keep my head down, do as told, and speak only when necessary. Aunt Claire had no patience for tears or complaints, and I had no energy left to fight. "It's for your own good," she'd often say after a particularly harsh scolding, as if the sting of her words was supposed to mold me into someone better. I wasn't sure who that better person was supposed to be. All I knew was I was getting really good at being alone, at being quiet, at not being a problem. Because in Aunt Claire's house, not being a problem was the best thing you could be. Living with Aunt Claire was suffocating, and I found myself missing my mom more each day, even though I knew she had let me go without much of a fight. One afternoon, the longing got too much. Aunt Claire was out, probably at her bridge club, and I knew I had a couple of hours at least. Her phone was always left on the kitchen counter, charging next to the fruit bowl. It seemed like my only link back to my old life. I hesitated for a minute before I picked it up. Dialing my mom's number was muscle memory. I hadn't forgotten it, maybe I never would. My heart was racing as I heard the phone ring. Once, twice, then her voice. "Hello? Mom? It's me, Julie." There was a pause, a breath maybe, then, "Julie, why are you calling?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Another pause, longer this time. Then cold, hard, "You shouldn't have called." "But Mom." "Julie, listen to me. You need to stop this. I can't have you calling me." "But why?" "I miss you, Mom. I miss home. When can I come back?" Her voice was flat, emotionless as if she was discussing the weather. "You can't. That's done. Don't call here anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, please. Just don't, Julie. There's nothing here for you. Goodbye." She hung up, and the line went dead. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I felt my hands shake as I put the phone back on the charger. The finality in her voice broke something in me. She didn't want me. She really didn't want me anymore. Tears blurred my vision as I stumbled to my room. I closed the door softly, not wanting to make any noise that might hint at my rebellion. I sat on the floor, my back against my bed, and let myself cry. The room felt smaller than ever, a box that was slowly closing in on me. About an hour later, I heard the front door open and close. Aunt Claire's voice called out, "Julie? You better have finished your chores." "Yes, Aunt Claire," I called back, wiping my eyes quickly with the back of my hand. I didn't want her to see any signs of weakness. Weakness was not tolerated here. I went to the kitchen to help with dinner as if nothing had happened, but inside, I was different. I felt emptier, more alone. Mom's voice, those final words, played over and over in my head. That night, Aunt Claire discovered the call log on her phone. Her face twisted into a scowl as she stormed into my room, her voice a harsh whisper that cut through the quiet. "So, you took my phone to call your mother? Thought you'd go behind my back?" I froze, the blood draining from my face. I just wanted to hear her voice. Aunt Claire laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "And what did that get you, huh? She doesn't want you, Julie. Even you can't deny it now." Her words were like ice, and I felt them chill me to the bone. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight and painful. "No more phone. No more pity parties. You're here because she doesn't want you. Remember that." The punishment was severe. More chores, stricter rules, and the cold shoulder from Aunt Claire, who made sure every day thereafter that I felt just how unwanted I was. Aunt Claire's house had become a prison, each day dragging, heavier than the last. It was clear I was nothing but a burden to her, a nuisance she tolerated only because she had to. But even that thin thread of obligation snapped one chilly morning a year into my stay. "You're packing your bags today, Julie," Aunt Claire announced over breakfast, her voice stern and final. I stared at her, spoon halfway to my mouth. "What? Why?" "Your mother stopped sending money." "No money, no reason to keep you here," she replied bluntly, sipping her coffee as if we were discussing something as trivial as the weather. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. "So, what happens to me now?" She shrugged, a cold, dismissive gesture. "Not my problem. You can go live with your grandmother. If she won't take you, then it's the orphanage." The thought of going to an orphanage terrified me, but the mention of Grandma sparked a tiny flicker of hope. I hadn't seen her since I was little, barely remembered her, but surely she wouldn't turn me away. Packing my bags felt surreal, like I was stripping away layers of my life at Aunt Claire's, each item a reminder of the year I'd lost. Aunt Claire drove me to Grandma's, the car ride silent except for the hum of the engine. We arrived at a modest house, smaller and cozier than Aunt Claire's imposing place. Grandma was waiting at the door, her expression unreadable. "This is Julie, your granddaughter," Aunt Claire said, not bothering with niceties. "I can't keep her anymore. Sarah stopped paying." Grandma looked me over, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "I see. Come in, Julie." Aunt Claire didn't linger. With a brief nod, she left, her duty discarded as easily as she'd disposed of me. Inside, Grandma's house was warm, filled with the scent of cinnamon and something sweet baking. It felt welcoming, a stark contrast to Aunt Claire's sterile environment. "You'll be staying in the guest room. I suppose we'll need to sort out some more permanent arrangements," Grandma said, leading me down the hall. The guest room was small, with a window overlooking the garden. It felt safe, a word I hadn't associated with a place in a long time. "Thank you, Grandma," I said, my voice low, still unsure of my welcome. She nodded. "We're family, Julie. You belong here more than anywhere else." Over the next few weeks, I adjusted to life with Grandma. It was different. She was strict, but there was a kindness to her rules, a gentleness in her reprimands. "You need to do your chores, Julie. Everyone contributes here," she would remind me, but her tone was patient, not harsh. "Yes, Grandma," I would respond, grateful for her fair approach. Living with Grandma, I began to heal. I found solace in the quiet routine of our days, the peaceful nights, and the steady rhythm of life that was so different from the chaos with Aunt Claire. The months rolled by, and on my 16th birthday, Grandma made a decision that would seal our bond forever. Over breakfast, she slid an envelope across the table to me. "Take a look at this, Julie," she said, her voice carrying a mix of seriousness and warmth. I opened the envelope, pulling out some official-looking papers. "What's this?" "It's adoption papers, Julie. I want to adopt you. Make things official, so no one can ever make you feel unwanted again," she explained, watching me closely for my reaction. I felt a lump form in my throat. "Really, Grandma? You mean it?" "Yes, I do. You're not just staying here, Julie. You're my family, and it's time we made that clear to everyone else too." A few weeks later, it was done. We went to court, and I officially became Julie Bennett, with a new sense of belonging that I had longed for since Mom sent me away. With Grandma's support, I started looking towards the future. She encouraged me to focus on my studies, particularly science, which had always fascinated me. "You've got a sharp mind for it, Julie. You could go into medicine. How would you like that?" she suggested one day as we were going over some of my school projects. "I'd love that, Grandma. I want to help people," I replied, the idea taking root. "Then it's settled. We'll get you into a good college program. I'll support you every step of the way," she declared, her determination clear. True to her word, Grandma was there for me throughout my high school years. She tutored me in math and science, using her old school methods that were strict but effective. "You need to understand the basics, Julie. Can't skip the foundation," she'd insist whenever I struggled with complex problems. I graduated with top marks, thanks to her unwavering support. Grandma then helped me navigate the daunting college applications process. When I got accepted into a medical college with a partial scholarship, she was as proud as if she'd received the acceptance herself. "We'll manage the finances. Don't you worry about that," Grandma said when I fretted over the costs. "You focus on your studies. Become the best doctor you can be." Medical school was tough, but fulfilling. I was drawn to oncology, the branch of medicine that dealt with cancer. It was hard, emotionally and intellectually, but it felt right, like I was exactly where I needed to be. I completed my degree, then my internship, and finally, my residency, each step a milestone that Grandma celebrated. "You're making a real difference, Julie. I'm so proud of you," she'd say, her eyes shining with pride. By the time I turned 32, I was fully established in my career as an oncologist. My life was busy but fulfilling, filled with long hours at the hospital and the satisfaction of knowing I was making a difference. Through it all, Grandma was my anchor, always there to listen and offer advice on tough days. But life, as it often does, threw another curveball my way. Grandma's health, which had been declining, took a turn for the worse. It was swift and unexpected, the kind of decline that leaves you scrambling to catch your breath. I remember coming home one evening, tired after a particularly tough day at the hospital. Grandma was sitting in her favorite armchair, looking out the window. Her voice was weaker when she called me over. "Julie, come sit with me for a bit," she said, patting the chair next to her. I sat down, taking her hand in mine. It felt fragile, like a dried leaf that might crumble under too much pressure. "I'm not going to beat around the bush," she started, her tone serious. "The doctors, they say it's not much time now. We need to talk about things, practical things." The lump in my throat grew, my eyes stung with tears. "Grandma, please." She squeezed my hand, her grip still strong. "No tears now, Julie. We've got things to sort out. You need to be ready." The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's visits, late nights, and legal paperwork. Grandma wanted to ensure everything was in order for me, that there would be no complications with her estate or her wishes. When the end came, it was peaceful. Grandma passed away in her sleep, at home, just as she'd wanted. The emptiness her passing left was palpable, a silence in the house that was too heavy to bear at times. Planning the funeral was hard. I went through her address book, calling relatives and friends. The responses were polite, some even warm, but it became clear that not many would make the effort to come. My heart ached, not just for the loss of Grandma, but for the loneliness of this farewell. The funeral day was quiet, the chapel more empty than not. I stood there, feeling oddly detached as the priest spoke about life, loss, and legacy. It didn't take long after the funeral when the past I thought I'd left behind came knocking at my door. My mother, stepfather, and their daughter, who was now 20 years old, showed up unexpectedly. My mother didn't waste any time. "Julie, you need to share the inheritance your grandmother left you," she demanded, her tone entitled. I stared at them, disbelief mixing with anger. "You left me, remember? 20 years ago, you decided I was too much of a burden." My mother's face twisted into a sneer. "Ungrateful girl. Now you're a rich doctor with an inheritance. You owe us." I laughed, the sound bitter. "Grandma adopted me. Legally, you're nothing to me now." The shock on her face was almost comical. My stepfather, ever the bully, leaned in. "You're going to regret this, Julie." As they left, I slammed the door behind them, the click of the lock sounding unusually satisfying. Standing there, my back against the door, I felt a mix of relief and renewed determination. A few days after their first visit, I was at work when I got a call from a neighbor. "Julie, it looks like your family's at your house again. They've been bringing in furniture, looks like they're moving in or something." When I pulled into the driveway, the sight of their car parked out front made my stomach churn. I walked in to find my mother, stepfather, and stepsister unpacking boxes in the living room, acting as if they owned the place. "What are you doing?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother turned around, feigning surprise. "Oh, Julie. We're just settling in. After all, this is family property." "No, it's not. This is my house, legally left to me by Grandma. You need to leave. Now." My stepfather stepped forward, a smirk on his face. "Make us. We're family, and we deserve a part of this house." I could feel the rage bubbling inside me. "You haven't been family for over 20 years. You can't just come here and claim what's mine." My stepsister, watching from the side, finally piped up. "Come on, Julie, don't be so heartless. We're just asking for what's fair." "Fair?" I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "What's fair about abandoning a child? What's fair about only showing up when you think there's money to be had?" They had no answers, just scowls and muttered curses. "I'm calling the police," I declared, pulling out my phone. My mother tried to stop me. "You'll regret this, Julie. I've regretted knowing you for years. This is nothing new," I shot back as I dialed 911. The police arrived quickly. I explained the situation, showing them the legal documents proving my ownership of the house and Grandma's will. The officers were firm. "You need to leave," one of them told my mother and stepfather. "This property doesn't belong to you, and if you don't comply, you'll be removed forcibly." My stepfather glared at me, his anger clear, but there was nothing he could do. "This isn't over, Julie," he threatened as they gathered their things. "Oh, but it is," I replied, my tone cold and final. After they were gone, I walked through the house, through Grandma's house. Each room was filled with memories, each corner a testament to her love and the life she had built here, a life she had fought to pass on to me. Standing in her favorite spot by the window, I made a promise, not just to her, but to myself. I would not let the bitterness of the past tarnish my future. I had fought hard to become who I was, and I would continue to fight, to honor her legacy and the sacrifices she had made for me.